What's up, everybody? I love cutting you off right there.
Yeah.
That would have been a perfect beep. Anyways, my name's Indy. The gentleman next to me is Jay Powell from Powell Group Consulting, and welcome to Indie Game Business. This is an awesome episode. We've got Julian Rice, rep from Rice Studios. Kickstarter failure, to successfully shipping. Yeah, the tears. Successfully shipping Shujinkou, and it's on PlayStation, and I know it's on Steam because I just downloaded the demo. So if you want to check it out, download the demo on Steam right now. Welcome, Julian.
So welcome to the show, Julian. Let's start with our favorite question. Tell us how you originally got into the industry and walk us through what you've done up to this point.
Gotcha. Well, first of all, Jay, thanks for having me on. Really excited to be here. So it's really interesting when asked, like, how did you get into the industry? Because I was just a student a couple of years ago. I graduated from UCLA in 2020, and I founded Rice Games in 2018, end of 2018. And it was just, I had this idea of this game called Shujinkou that would feature the protagonist Shujinkou going on an adventure, kind of like what you'd see in One Piece or Naruto, right? Many different nations and all that sort of stuff. And so I had to make the game. At what point does I want to make this game turn into, oh, I'm like part of the industry now? Like, oh, cool stuff, right? So to me, at least, I feel like getting people to actually play your game and making some amount of money from it, from usually releasing it, early access does count too, in a way, does define getting into the industry. So if the question, how did you get into the industry? It was just working really hard on developing Shujinkou over the course of 6.5 years and releasing it on PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, and PC. And the Nintendo Switch version is coming out next week. Took a lot of effort to get it going, but I'm super excited to get that out there.
That is fantastic. I mean, from our side, we don't like to gatekeep when you're in the industry. So, I mean, in theory, if you're thinking about, I'm sure there's some line we're supposed to put somewhere, but I mean, yeah, start and doing it the way that you did it instead of, a lot of people go work for a different company and do that. And then they say, okay, I'm going to start my own thing. But I mean, you started your own thing before you were even out of college. So that's seriously impressive. So you just said 6.5 years of development. Now, I'm assuming a lot of that is because you weren't working on it full time and you had a job. So walk us through that 6 years. How many iterations did you go through? When did you decide to do the Kickstarter? And we'll start there. But yeah, walk us through that process for a fairly long development cycle.
For sure. I started alone in 2018, end of 2018, and I drew my own art, all that kind of stuff, until I realized I'm terrible at art. I cannot draw, like, even stick figures. So I ended up looking for artists on Indeed, put up a job posting, set up a website for the company, and found some people, hired them, set up the contracts. Not perfect contracts, but they got better over time. And from there, I used my savings. It was like $200 or something to pay for little things here and there, which meant I had to make more money by doing part-time jobs and so forth. So that kind of cycle of make money through part-time jobs as a student while also doing all the work you have to do as a student, right? Studying and all that, and also develop it yourself without getting paid anything, without being paid anything, was what pretty much continued for around 2 years. During those 2 years, I did manage to get us to exhibit at the Tokyo Game Show 2019 and 2020. As you might know, the game show for 2025 is starting this weekend. But we managed to showcase a platformer prototype of Shujinkou where you'd like move around left and right and kind of shoot orbs at monsters and all that kind of stuff. But it was like, it looked terrible now that I look at it now, but I'm so glad that I didn't even think about how good or bad it looked. I just wanted to get this idea out there in front of people, get some feedback, get some people excited about the idea that I had in my head, stuck in there, learn a language, learn Japanese, your favorite language, as you play a serious game, right? So that was pretty much like the first phase of development. the Kickstarter was kind of the climax. Like, hey, can we make enough money to fully develop this platformer? And the answer was no. And it was kind of close, but I kind of lost steam doing, the jobs and the education, like the studying, and also trying to market the Kickstarter. And the game didn't look that great. And it was just 1 or 2 levels we had made at the time. So it didn't work out, had to pivot, because to me, it really didn't matter what genre the game would be at the time. I just wanted to tell this story that I had, right? These characters, Shujinkou, going out there, doing that cool stuff. And so I looked into the role-playing games that inspired me the most when I was in high school and also in college. And those games included Shin Megami Tensei series, Etrian Odyssey, Persona, Rune Factory, Fire Emblem, all these bangers on the 3DS, and other consoles too. And so I shifted us to a first-person dungeon crawler and worked even harder to make more money. I graduated in 2020 and got a job at a Japanese place doing software engineering, and it paid reasonably well. So I basically ate bread and milk every day for it's not an exaggeration, and broccoli and the dumplings that you put in the water to boil. Like, I had very minimal, cheap diet for 3 or so years, with the occasional drinking with the boys and that kind of thing. And all the extra money went into my team. And so that was pretty much the second phase of development. Hopefully I'm not talking too long. And
No. You're good. Yeah.
Fantastic. So the second phase was just making a bunch of money, spending all that money on my team, not making a dollar for myself yet, and trying to make this game with 6 whole nations and 6 stories to tell. Just this gigantic masterpiece, like my life's work at the age of 22. Clearly that was not going to work out, right? So it didn't. It was like, it costs way too much money. What are we going to do? So I talked to my father about it. He suggested, hey, split into 3 parts, like Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, all these classic things start as trilogies. And it totally, struck a chord with me. So we did that, and zoom in a couple years later with a lot more money being spent, a lot more time working on, QA, fixing the bugs in the game, writing, getting the story up to par with other amazing JRPGs out there. And the last 2 or 3 years was really just focusing on touching up the game as much as possible for the first 2 nations. So that's like a brief summary of the whole development process. There were some immense obstacles, like my mother got stage 4 colon cancer in the middle of development, which did not help at all. In fact, it kind of was really stressful, as you can imagine. I had to take care of her while she was in the hospital with chemotherapy, while working my full-time job as a software engineer, and also managing, a team of 20 teammates spread across 7 different time zones for years. So it included hosting meetings while I was in the hospital and all sorts of stuff. But to me, it was just, I have to get this story out. At the time, I also wanted to make my mother proud by getting the game out before she'd passed, but I failed again, right? Just was too slow, as always, and had to make this release this year in February a dedication to her, because I really think the way she raised me and my motivation and all that really was what helped me cross the finish line. So just a whole bunch of, it's just a whole bunch of stuff that really made development difficult, but I'm glad I did everything the way I did it. I have no regrets about how the process has been.
You basically took the route that we tell all indie teams to never take.
Yeah,
but you pulled it off. That's one of the key things we all say. It's like, start with a small game, build from there. Don't try to put your life's dream into your first game, but you did it. So I appreciate it. Now every time I tell somebody that, they're going to be, oh, well, what about Julian? I'm like, oh, this, that's completely different. It's fantastic. I mean, you to stick through it, especially with your mom passing and everything. Most people wouldn't do that. And, that shows a level of resilience, or, as I like to put it, just stubbornness to get it done. And that's absolutely fantastic. So peeling back a couple of layers, When you did the Kickstarter, where do you think that went sideways? What went wrong? Why do you feel that you didn't get the amount of funding that you needed, and how would you approach that differently now?
Yeah. So about that, I do think I at the time was like 19 or 20 years old, so I didn't really have any like mental acuity at the time. Not to like say anything about the 19, 20 year olds listening right now. You guys are probably way better than I was back then. But I was expecting at the time that the game shows, performance, all the extra articles, people saying, "Oh, this looks so cool," blah blah blah. I thought that momentum would carry over if we had just done the Kickstarter a month later, which we did, but no, that's not really how it works. Really setting a campaign up before you actually start the campaign is crucial, from what someone who didn't do that can say. So I'd say try to get your fan like early access, or itch.io, different ways to get people to play your game and be interested in it and be willing to put their hard-earned money into your incomplete project, right? That's a tall order, especially if you don't have any like past records. Like if one of the Final Fantasy dudes was like, "Oh yeah, I just want to make my own Final Fantasy kind of game, give me $50." I'm pretty sure most people would be like, "Oh hell yeah, take my 50," right? But for you, if you're 20 years old or if you're 27 and you just switch like careers, or you're just trying to get into the game industry, you're not going to have as strong of a record as these Final Fantasy monsters or savages in a positive meaning. So I do think getting that campaign going before you actually start the campaign is important. Also, I believe, I don't know if we're allowed to talk about this, but there are sneaky ways to get, I've seen Kickstarters going early on, like having enough money on your own to kind of get people to back the stuff early so that you can say, "Oh, fund it in 20 minutes or fund it in 50 minutes." It's a little sneaky, but if it gets the job done, honestly, it'll bring more attention to your project. And as long as it's kind of realistic looking, like the numbers, like you don't have 5 million put into a $50,000 project in the first day, then I think it has its benefits for sure. So that would be my main advice.
So even though it failed, what lessons did you take away from it? What did you learn during that process that helped the rest of the game development?
That's a great question. I would say I was really overly optimistic back then. So 20-year-old Julian's mentality was, "Oh, I made a cool prototype. I have cool ideas. I have some skill and I have a pretty talented team. People will just give us money and we'll be able to make the game and sell it and it'll do well." Like, obviously, since the game show went so well, people are just going to give us money. But you can't expect people to just give you money because you've seen other Kickstarters all like be successful. For every successful Kickstarter there are going to be a bunch of unsuccessful ones. And for every video game that comes out, there's like hit indie game, there's going to be a bunch that just go under the radar that might be just as good that you don't see, right? So things don't get handed to you. You're going to have to work for the results that you want, is basically what I learned from the Kickstarter failure. Also, be open to pivoting, right? If we had achieved the Kickstarter goal, I think we would have gone with a platformer with a $45,000 budget, because that's what the number was set at for Kickstarter. I don't know if we could have made a game nearly as good as the one we have today with $45,000, maybe a second Kickstarter, and it being a platformer, when the team that I assembled clearly wasn't suited for Celeste or Super Meat Boy or Hollow Knight type of artwork and gameplay mechanics, right? So we had to find something that would fit the team's skill levels more like specialties, because we had beautiful 2D artists drawing portraits, right? And also my own motivation. I wasn't that good at making platformers. I loved dungeon crawlers. Why did I make platformers? Because a bunch of YouTube tutorials back in the day were like, "Oh, here's how to make a platformer in Game Maker Studio 2 or Unity. Like, let's make them jump around and shoot little bullets and stuff." So when you don't know anything, you go to the easiest resource and then try to make your dream work off of that resource. But I learned through failure that just do what you want to do. Try not to be over ambitious. I know it's weird coming from me, but if I tried to make like a Dark Souls or something, it would not have ever worked out. So try to be like, keep the scope relatively reasonable for what you can do as a programmer, and things will work out if you keep working at it.
So you could safely say that was your welcome to the game industry moment. You had all your hopes and dreams, and then Kickstarter crushed that, for lack of a better.
It wasn't that devastating, because it wasn't like we received a failing result immediately, right? It's a 30-day thing, and by day 15 you kind of see that you're probably not going to make it. So that kind of sense of failure or not making it sucks, obviously, but it's not like submitting something to, for example, Sony or Nintendo and them rejecting it, right? That kind of like instant rejection feeling sucks a lot more from my experience.
It was a 30-day rejection.
Oh yeah, but it's a slow kind of,
all right, so
poison ailment.
You mentioned going from the 2D to the 3D. It's like, was that decision a result of the Kickstarter, or was that just something that you decided? I mean, where did that decision find root?
Yeah, so I just asked myself after it failed, like, do I really want to keep pushing on this platformer? And then I looked back at all the games I loved playing in high school, and most of them are dungeon crawlers, JRPGs/DRPGs with complex, equipment and stats and all this kind of stuff. And I just thought to myself, it's a little more complex than a platformer, barring the physics side of things. But if I can figure out the data, right, like how do enemies attack? How do they determine how to attack certain heroes and all that stuff? If I could figure it, like every little aspect of an RPG one by one and build upon that, I could probably make an RPG with my team. And so I just looked back at the games I liked the most. I'll just say it right here. Etrian Odyssey, the series, 4 specifically, is probably my favorite 3DS/portable game of all time. We take heavy inspiration from the dungeon crawling in that game. Fire Emblem Awakening, character art is probably my favorite character art in any game. Just beautiful characters. So if you look at our characters and look at the characters in Fire Emblem Awakening, you'll notice the technical style is inspired. Of course, our artists have their own special flair and skill that makes Shujinkou's art stand out as well. And if you look at the dialogue, the humor, the wit, Paper Mario Thousand Year Door is probably my favorite game of all time, like just overall. And so I found people on the team who like the same game. I'm like, hey, you guys have skill. You like the same games I like. I'll pay you. Let's try to make something inspired, maybe even better somehow. And they're like, hell yeah, let's do it. So just got a bunch of passion-filled people that had similar games that they liked as me. And we just kind of made a mixture of all the favorite games we have or we like. So
okay, that's completely understandable. Now tell me where you can learn Japanese while you play this game part comes in.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, that's a great follow-up. I started studying Japanese when I was in high school, and I worked really hard. And my teacher at the time said, hey, in college, you should major in it. Just keep studying. You're really good. I'm like, oh, for once I was praised by the Japanese. This is an amazing feeling. So I decided to double major in Japanese, and I only hung out with other than, my American friends, I only hung out with Japanese people at the university that didn't really speak much English. So that really elevated my Japanese skill. I was also interested in the language itself because I was studying linguistics at the time as well as computer science. So kind of seeing the technical differences between Japanese, English, and other languages was really, really thought-provoking. And so at the time, obviously the Shujinkou idea with Shujinkou doing all the crazy stuff is like the video game fantasy side of things. But let's take what I was learning and try to put it all together into this thing too. And that would include my major in linguistics and computer science, my major in Japanese, and my minor in entrepreneurship, which is, founding the company, doing the all the financial stuff, legal stuff, marketing stuff. And I tried to tie everything that I was learning, because you can really learn a lot if you try in high school and college, and executing that in the whole Rice Games / Shujinkou project. So yeah, my interest in Japanese, my love for Japan, and the fact that I was studying Japanese actively at the time and wanted to teach the basics to people who may not have had the same kind of resources or opportunities that I had, while still playing a fun game like those that I mentioned earlier, it really brought everything together.
So how did you integrate it? So if you're playing the game, is it like an option for subtitles, or explain how you integrate it into the bigger project?
Yeah, so in the end, languages have syntax. It's like a bunch of rules that dictate how a language operates, right? Like grammar, particles, nouns, how they interact with each other, and all that stuff. And Japanese has its own rules that you must learn so that you can speak it accurately, right? So the idea was to base the combat system. That was the first thing that really stuck in my mind, such that by fighting more and more monsters, I'd be able to learn the rules of the language so that I'd be able to read words and so forth as I go on. And so it was a bunch of game design planning and stuff like that, conception, that led to the idea of using the kind of like symbols or characters that make up Japanese, hiragana, katakana, and kanji. Kanji is borrowed from Chinese in a way, but using those to kind of reveal the names of the enemies that you're fighting. So if you have an enemy like dog, in English, it's D-O-G. So if I used the letters D in combat against the dog, I would reveal the D in D-O-G, right? It's kind of like that, but for Japanese. And so by revealing more of their name, you get to deal more damage, and that kind of reinforces the alphabet that you get to learn as you play. And there's like 46 in hiragana, 46 in katakana. So there's quite a bit that you have to remember. So I think the grindy nature of a role-playing game where you just have to fight a lot of monsters to progress helps with the memorization side of things too. That's just one example. So I tried to look at role-playing features just across the spectrum of role-playing games that I've played throughout my life. And I looked at my knowledge of Japanese, of the grammar, of all sorts of stuff. And I thought to myself, okay, how do I like integrate it, like weave it in, but make it interesting enough that if you don't give a damn about learning the language, because a lot of gamers don't care, you can just kind of forego the learning-ish side and still play it like a Final Fantasy or a Shin Megami Tensei. So it's really unique, and there is no other game that does it like this in the industry, which is why it's been so difficult to kind of explain it through text. It's much easier for me to explain it like this in this medium. So plenty of examples though. You can also turn off Japanese mode, so everything turns into English at the click of a button for those who really don't want to like worry about like, oh, what should I use or something like that. So
that is seriously impressive. I mean, that's kudos on that one. Because that's just not something you end up walking a fine line, because you want to be able to explain to gamers that they can actually learn Japanese, which, let's face it, a lot of gamers, especially those that are into JRPGs, want to learn Japanese. I know I have a 14-year-old that is that target audience right now. But the words like educational and edutainment, when it comes to marketing, just would kill something like this, because everyone's like, oh, whatever, it's a school game, I don't want to play it.
Yeah.
So I mean, one, good job on integrating all that, but two, I mean, fantastic job of not beating people over the head with it and jeopardizing the sales of the game. So I mean, how many are you talking about your team? How big was your team during development, and are they all still there, or were they like contract, or how big did it get?
Everyone on the team is contract. I didn't have the funds to do payroll and insurance and all that stuff especially for Americans. Americans are expensive. I'm also American, so I can say that, by the way. But it's like, cost of living is insane in America compared to, other places. So contract was like, hey, I'll pay you to do this. You do this, I pay you. If you don't do any work, I don't pay you, right? And so you have the freedom to go work for other games and do other stuff. But if I need this by this deadline, let's set things up so that both sides are happy. And we fostered a really great relationship with most everyone that I had ever hired. I did bring on interns early on in development to help with programming, because I kind of thought it'd be good to have multiple people trying to code stuff. But we were all students, and none of us were super skilled at the time, right? So when I first joined my full-time job doing software engineering, and I had to learn about unit tests and regression checks and all these kinds of things, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're cooked for Shujinkou. Like, what? We don't even have a QA team, right? So the interns finished their period, went on with their own stuff. Most of them went to really great places. By the way, we had awesome people go to Unity. I love them so much. But it ended up being me alone doing pretty much the bulk, like 99% plus of the code, rewriting, refactoring, unit tests, documentation, everything you can imagine. It was easily over 100 pages of documentation. And I had to also hire a QA team to kind of bring everyone in and look at the game from a technical standpoint and find and fix bugs. We didn't even fix all the bugs. In fact, a lot of reviews are like, this game has some bugs. I'm so sorry, but we tried our best. We cleared over 1,000 bugs in 2024, I believe. And so that's 5 people on the 4/5 people on the QA team finding 1,000 issues, and then me single-handedly fixing all 1,000 plus issues and asking them to double check all 1,000 issues after it's been fixed, and so forth. So I think the question was about the team, and it was basically me paying them to do stuff and all of us working together to get things done.
So were you all generally in the same area, or were you spread out across the world? Or
yeah, spread out everywhere. We have people in so many states, I can't even remember all the states, but I think Hawaii to Massachusetts, Michigan, Montana, Florida, just Texas, I think, and also California, of course. And then we had people in Germany, a couple of extremely talented artists, just amazing. I got to meet them for the first time in May, and we drank a lot of beer because it's a German thing, right? Yeah, yes. Yeah. So
you don't want to offend the culture.
So. Yeah. Well, we did that in Paris, so it was kind of weird, but but we also have someone in England as well as Australia, right? So it's pretty all over the place. For a couple of years, I had 2 meetings per Sunday. One, you could choose which time you'd want to join, and I was extremely dedicated and am still extremely dedicated to the project. So I would attend both meetings and say the same stuff twice, and they would give their updates, etc. So I tried my best to give them the freedom to choose. Sometimes they'd have plans the whole time, so it's no problem at all. But it would be every Sunday, and the time zones were brutal. It would be 1 p.m. Pacific time, and everyone else would kind of adjust to that. But now that I've moved to Tokyo, that's my 5 a.m., and it's brutal. So the last 2 years of development to bring this game to life on the PlayStation 5 and PC involved me waking, I had worked until 3 a.m. and then woke up at 5:30 a.m. to do the meeting. And then we'd finish at 6:30 or 7. I'd take an hour nap till 8, and then I'd have to go to my full-time job for another 8 to 10 hours. And then I'd get back home and then cook some dumplings up, and then just work until 3 a.m. again to just get this stuff going. So it was just a pretty brutal cycle. Mondays were really brutal. But again, it's a challenge. Overcome the challenge. It's okay if you don't work 24/7. You can still have the energy to try your best every day, and eventually you will get there. And that's what I think I embody to some degree.
I'm just yeah. Uh, so we got a question from Mendisa. How did you decide between selling through normal game channels like Steam and console versus educational ones like school districts and educational companies?
Thank you for the question, Mendisa. The answer is simple. It's a video game, so has to go to video game mediums. I wanted to make a JRPG first and foremost. The language learning stuff is really cool and it's innovative and it's not just a gimmick. I promise you, it's not just one of those, you see a bunch of games that are like, learn Japanese as you play. And for the most part, from what I've seen, there's no deep lore, there's no complex music, there's no multidimensional characters. The dungeons are not completely made up, right? Fantasy dungeons, right? We have this completely huge world, dozens of extremely well thought out characters, thanks to the writing team and me just a little bit. And tons of music, like 158 track soundtrack, right? And just over 200 hours of raw video game gameplay. So even before getting to that point, I wanted to make something like that, which is why it had to be a video game. Let's go with Steam, let's go with the consoles, etc. Right? The big focus was, the consoles, because I'm a console gamer. I was, until I started playing Civ 6 on PC. Oh my gosh, it's probably my biggest addiction these days. Civilization is my dream game now. But up until like recently, I've been a massive console gamer. So I wanted to get my game out on the consoles. That's pretty much how it goes. But we have, just before we go to the next topic, I do talk to certain schools and certain educational groups about the game, because it's a unique game that can, we can market it in different directions. If I want to emphasize the educational side, I can do that, because our game does have the meat to support learning hiragana, katakana, basic grammar, all that kind of stuff. So I am in conversation with some pretty big Japanese places that are focused on education, as well as we've gotten contact from like universities in the US and in Europe. Like, hey, you want to like collab or something? Like, your game looks cool. So that's something we want to explore too. But first and foremost, video game. Hopefully that answers your question.
So, I mean, mentioning the consoles, you're at the time, your first time developer, haven't shipped anything, had no track record, anything. How did you go about getting on the radar and doing your deals with Sony and Nintendo?
Yes. So 2019 game show, nothing significant happened, though the indie corner that we were part of was sponsored by Nintendo partially. So that's just something to keep in mind. 2020, they also sponsored Indie Corner again. COVID-19 was going wild at the time, so I couldn't go to Japan. So we kind of did an online booth for Shujinkou. That did okay, but the biggest point of that was I managed to get the contact of one of the employees of Nintendo, who was kind of in charge of handling liaisons with indies that were exhibiting at the indie corner of the exhibit. Okay, that's a really long sentence, but hopefully that makes sense. So I got in touch with him. I'm like, hey, earlier this year, actually, I submitted a request to get Shujinkou on Switch. So I want the Nintendo Switch dev kit, and Nintendo of America rejected me 3 times. And I'm like upset because I don't know why they're rejecting me. They don't tell me why they're rejecting me. They say they're not going to tell me why they're rejecting me. Can we have a talk about this? This was all in Japanese, by the way. And he's like, yeah, let me take a look at your game. So he took a look and he's like, okay, we can kind of set up a call if you want. And so I had a video call with him and 2 higher up Japanese, I don't think they're executives, but they're pretty high up managers of sorts in Kyoto. It was an online call. I was in the US. And we had a negotiation for around an hour. They're like, who are you? I'm like, Julian. And they're like, what have you done? I'm like, failed Kickstarter and a lot of passion. They're like, you're like 21, dude. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm at UCLA and I work hard and I got a lot of smart teammates. we can totally make this. And you're like, never made a game before, never published a game before. Why should we trust you? And I'm like, I promise you I'll get this thing out. It's about learning Japanese, your language. I'm speaking to you in your language. I'm negotiating with you in your language. Let this become a thing. Like, the Switch is touchscreen, so you can practice writing Japanese. It'll be, maybe I can even get a stylus for the bundle when the game eventually comes out. They're like, oh, that actually sounds really cool. And eventually, one of the managers cracked a joke like, we have Ring Fitness, and I think a boxing like training game was about to come out at the time as well. They're like, so if we have boxing and we have like Ring Fit, maybe a learn Japanese kind of thing, but a real game could be pretty cool. And if you do make that, I'd love for you to have our Nintendo of America and Europe staff play the game so they can learn some Japanese. And we all laughed, and that locked me in. And we basically got the kit after that. They basically issued an order to Nintendo of America saying, hey, give that Julian guy a kit. Well, he has to pay, obviously. And so I paid up quite a bit of money to buy the kit. And that came over. I learned how to get the game working on it. And Zoom, like 4 years later, 5 years later, it's coming out on the Switch next week. It took a little longer than expected, but that was the process for Nintendo. Sony was a lot easier. They wanted a game design document and proper evidence that like it's an actual company / actual developer. So I wrote around a 30-page minimized game design document that covers the main scope of the game, the team, the skills of the team, the company burn rate, like how much money we're spending a month. It was really variable, but tried to be as transparent as possible and explain the goals of the game. And they accepted us first try. So, but those kits were more expensive. So
yes,
yeah. So that kind of explains the Switch and Sony side. I don't think I have to explain the Steam side. That one's barrier to entry is pretty easy comparatively.
Do you have $100? Or is it 200 now, or whatever?
It's 100.
It is.
It's 100.
Oh, so the game goes out. Obviously, a big part of this is marketing and getting in front of reviewers and influencers and all that stuff. So how did y'all hire a team to do that? How did you go about letting everyone know that the game was available and it existed?
Yeah, this is our greatest weakness right now. Basically, I've done like 98% of everything. So every reach out to every influencer, every news media outlet, everyone I could find, I would search up people's names on Google, plus add email, so we'd see if their email would appear somewhere. If not, I'd like have to do actual like hunting around for people's contacts. I'd send manually written emails for like 6 or 8 hours of the day at a cafe. I could not do that in my house. Like, it was so exhausting. And then for the trailers, I storyboarded every trailer. I recorded every clip. I planned all the text that appears in it, all the music timing, transitions, everything was also planned. That was also extremely exhausting. Adobe Premiere Pro was what I mainly used. I recommend that if you want a relatively easy to learn video making software. It's a little expensive though, so I don't like that. But if you have a little bit of money, it does come with good libraries for transitions and a lot of documentation to teach you how to do stuff. Outside of that, press kits, I just wrote press kits based on the resources I could find online. Media outlets, I prepared all the publisher codes for said media outlets. We should talk about media outlets later, but basically that went pretty well overall. Didn't get as many reviews written for the game as we wanted, but I did send around 70 key requests, like review requests, back in February, March. And then I've already sent another 20 or 30 for the Switch release, which has brought us up to around 90 or 100. And only 10% or so have actually like responded or activated the keys. So it's been a difficult journey trying to get people to do stuff. But 10 out of 100 is better than 5 or 3 or whatever. So I'm extremely grateful for the people who really have activated the game, put dozens of hours of their life into the game before it came out, and gave it comprehensive, thorough reviews.
All right, so media outlets, let's talk about them now. What was your experience there? Why did you want to talk about them? Tell us all the juice.
It's a mixed bag. I have a lot of people I respect and love from the media outlets that I've been able to be in communication with, but I'll start positive. So people are really friendly and excited to play new games. The problem is there's so many awesome new games coming out that they can't prioritize all the games, right? So what you have is people who, journalists who are stressed out, who need to like review 5 games in 2 or 3 weeks and so have to play a bunch. They won't have the time to play all of a game, especially if it's a really lengthy game like Shujinkou. But our game is lengthy. It's inspired by, titles like Persona 5 or Fire Emblem Three Houses, right? Fire Emblem Awakening. These games take 40, 50, 60, 70 hours, some even more, to really unlock all the systems, see the story and the characters grow, experience how we have directed the game such that balance gets better over time, equipment gets more interesting, quests get more exciting, music gets more intense, right? All this stuff grows for a JRPG, for a proper JRPG. And it's not like an indie game that might take 5 or 10 hours to clear. There's a difference there, concretely. And so these reviewers sometimes don't have the time to pour in 50, 60, 80 hours into the game. But what that leads to is their review being not exactly comprehensive, nor does it showcase even a small portion of the true scope of the title. So when I say mixed bag, I've encountered several cases where established Metacritic / OpenCritic reviewers play less than like 2% of the game's scope and put out a review that isn't like, that's pretty inflammatory. And so that really hurts me because my team and I work so hard. Everyone says they work hard, and I'm not going to try to compare here and there, but I do have interviews in Japanese and in English that talk about some of the obstacles that my team and I had to go through to bring this thing out. There's tens of thousands of hours of hard work by a bunch of passionate people who have no ill intent. We just want our awesome game to be out there in front of as many gamers as possible. But you run into these people that don't play the game, don't write legitimate reviews, and it really feels like a mixed bag at that point. Luckily, and for anyone listening who is doing development, I implemented extremely thorough logging systems, data analytics, and so I could track who was not playing the game. And so I would go to said publication's editor-in-chief and be like, hey, your guy played like 2 areas out of 45 areas in the game, and he hasn't even unlocked skills yet. Is his review of Shujinkou, the video game, really a comprehensive review of the game that we created? And every single time, 100%, they would switch the type of review or remove the review, because they in the end, they know that it doesn't fit their own editorial policies, right? If they had a different opinion, we would have gone back and forth more. So that's just my slightly like not as positive as the first 40 minutes of this podcast, but I just want to be transparent about how difficult it's been to get people to play such a giant game. And if you're trying to like make it big as an indie developer, maybe don't make like an 80-hour game unless you really want to, like me, in which case we can go through the struggles together. But no regrets. Again, no regrets whatsoever. It's just it's been a pain point for sure.
So I want to know, is this like stuff that you learned at UCLA? Through the course of this interview, you've rattled off several things that I know 95% of the teams making their first game don't even think about doing. Even basics like starting a company and doing contracts, up through managing, your reviewers like that with the codes, not with the codes, with the analytics and integrating that. Where did all of those insights come from?
Thanks for asking. So I would say UCLA helped a little bit with stuff. I wouldn't say the computer science program taught me much about game development, right? It's a computer science program, not a game development program. But doing the double major and minor in 3.5 years did teach me work ethic, like work your butt off. Also, doing the paid oddball job, like strange jobs to make money, was also something that made me really busy. And so I think trying to spend time learning new things, right? You're never going to be good at everything from the start. Like if I had dedicated more time to art, I would be able to at least draw a stick figure, but I can't even draw a stick figure at this point, right? Because I didn't dedicate any time to it. So the things I did dedicate time to were like, how do we make a fun game? Or how do we integrate learning mechanics into this game without making it feel like a learning game? Or I am going to file taxes for the company. How do I do that? Let's actually look into that, right? Or I want to make a cool studio website for my company so that when prospective applicants look at my website, they're like, oh, this guy looks like a pretty legit guy. And so I'm going to double check the English 10 times, right? And I'm going to make sure the HTML works on mobile and on iPad and on PC. Like it's just thinking about things a lot. You can use Sketchpaper. I use Sketchpaper a lot. I have like a bunch of notebooks where I just sketch like arrows and circles and stuff like that to figure out exactly what I want to do. And it's just the process of learning things. I wouldn't have been able to do any of this 5 years ago, right? So it's just a matter of time and work ethic, diligence. So, but some of the stuff, of course, comes with, being at UCLA. Also, the full-time job as a software engineer taught me the importance of logs, not necessarily for video games, but, in the tech space, there are mutual similarities between stuff like logging data or logging errors, right? If you run into an error, if it doesn't tell me that you guys ran into an error, I'll never be able to know. And then I'll get people dogging on me for the buggy game. But at this point, I set up error logs. So whenever someone encounters an error, I can actually see it immediately, try to get a patch out ASAP. The fastest I've been able to do it's like an hour and a half on PlayStation and Steam. So they messaged me an hour and a half later. I got the fix up on production, tested, of course. And, it's that kind of rinse and repeat. Detail oriented, focused on everything. Getting enough sleep is important too. I didn't do that for the first 4 or 5 years of development, but then after losing my mom, it's like you should probably take care of your health, right? So I started to sleep more after that, and that did have a positive impact on my work and overall mental health.
Yeah, that's a big part. So going back to marketing real quick with a question, was it mostly U.S. English language influencers and media that you went to, or more Japanese, or what ratio there?
It was more English because the game is in English. And so it's really hard to get Japanese influencers to look at a game that's got a story in English. But it has attracted a little bit of attention with the Japanese community because there are some groups that love dungeon crawlers, and they're like, oh, new dungeon crawler, it's #1 on OpenCritic right now, despite having very few reviews. Like when's the last time a DRPG has been ranked that high? So a lot of people around the world who don't speak English as their native language are checking it out, including some influencers. But for the most part, before launch, it's been contacting English influencers.
I think Tom sums up here. I've seen some AAA titles that don't have any form of error reporting. So seeing this from an indie is amazing. And yes, it is. So are you doing post-launch content? I mean, okay. That was the question. He's like, you've got the PS version out and you've got the PC version out. Switch is coming out. Is tomorrow, this week, next week?
Yeah.
How much time are you investing? What are your plans for the DLC, for post-launch content? Because that has become such a huge amount of keeping rhythm with the game and keeping people playing.
Yeah, especially for a single-player game. I think especially for a single-player game, because once you finish, you just don't play unless there's new content, right? So yeah, we are really serious about post-launch content. It's mostly fixes in QOL, quality of life. I I think I've fixed and implemented at least 200 or 300 things since February, including major features that were requested by players. So one example is navigating the towns in the game is a little tedious. So how do we resolve that issue? The answer is having a quick travel that lets you travel quickly to certain important spots. So I implemented that after launch. Another example could be a bug / not a bug, but a specification that wasn't really making gamers happy. If you move in the labyrinth and the time of day changes, your character stops, waits for the time of day to change, and then you're allowed to move. This is a little debilitating when you have spikes that move in real time and you're moving through the spikes and the time changes like, and then the spikes hit you and you're like, what, Julian, what are you doing? And I'm like, yeah, it's just I didn't want any like edge cases to come with time switching and pausing the game or whatever. But I fixed that, and now you can just move smoothly. The time just changes. Time of day just changes naturally. Visuals change, all that stuff. And that's an example of an improvement that was made. In terms of new content, we're not like adding any brand new labyrinths or brand new quests or enemies just yet, but we are fixing issues, adding quality of life mechanics, including even new menus to the game. And it's led to quite the positive impact for our still small but very passionate fan base.
So before we went live, you mentioned that you learned that PC players don't like day one DLC. Touch on that for a little bit. What did you learn? What did you do different?
Yeah, so I didn't even think about it at first until like I thought, again, maybe it's just my naivety, like with the Kickstarter thing, thinking that people just give me money. I just looked at all of my favorite games, right? Eternality and Fire Emblem, and they all come with the digital art book and digital soundtrack. So if we do the same, then it will be looked upon positively, or people will treat it like it's a major JRPG. And a lot of people do, or did, I guess, since it released, especially on the PS5. I mean, Sony gave us okay for pre-orders. This is like, I talked to them about this. They said we're like a unicorn example. First time studio, first time game, self-publishing, no past titles from anyone on the team. And we somehow convinced them to let us do pre-orders, putting our game adjacent to Civ 7, which I heard isn't that great just yet, and Monster Hunter. So our little, Shujinkou, the characters I dreamed about in college, were sitting next to these behemoths. And the fact that we had a digital art book and select soundtrack at the time helped a lot, even though it's technically day one DLC, if you want to consider those two executable applications as such. And then for the other DLC we had, the swimsuits and the Akuma costumes, it really is as extra as it can get. The Shujinkou has 200-300 hours of content, especially if you want to platinum it. And so I said this earlier, but we're not doing this like EA, they take all the meat and veggies from the burger and give you buns and you have to pay for everything else. It's not like that. We're giving you burgers, fries, 2 burgers, because there's the Genya and Sabaku arc, 2 different story arcs, 2 whole burgers, a bunch of fries, like a gallon of fries, 10 drinks. And then on the side, at the very end, if you like swimsuits and girls and stuff like that, which I like, you can, get the extra cherry on top. And if you don't want to get it, you can get on sale later on or something like that. But the fact that we're doing that in the first place really pissed off a lot of PC gamers. And I understand why. I can empathize with it, because a lot of publishers don't have their players' best interests when they're coming up with pricing, right? It's all about making money. So I completely understand where they're coming from. I just ended up being part of the target, getting like assaulted by crazy verbal things that I'm surprised Steam even lets people post that kind of stuff on the forums. But
it's
it's
horrible.
insane.
Yes,
but I know they wouldn't say it in my face directly, and I know that if I just don't respond to them, they'll probably go away eventually and move on with their life. And I'll move on with Shujinkou DLC out, and we get a bunch of fans saying, "Oh, that chick looks great in the swimsuit," or "That dude looks so hot," that kind of thing, right? So it makes me happy that we did that in the first place. Could we have delayed the launch a little bit? Maybe, but I just wanted to get everything out there.
So as another big Civ 6 player, Civ 7 isn't bad. It's just different. And
I see.
I felt the same way until a good friend of mine gave me like a 30, 40-minute lecture on why it's better. And I was like, okay, now it makes sense. But yeah,
Yeah.
we can touch on that after if you want.
Oh,
So what's next? I mean, where does Rice Games go from here? What I mean, are you going to continue building on this? Are you going to make something new?
yeah. So Shujinkou, I think I mentioned this at some point earlier. It's supposed to be Shujinkou going on a massive adventure spanning 6 nations, and we got 2 nations out, and it's a trilogy. So the next major project is obviously going to be the second game, which covers the 3rd and 4th nations. And that's going to have a bunch of build-up, a great climax, and it will tie into the final game, which will conclusively end the series. Like, I already know the end. I came up with the ending in 2019. So it's just a matter of working hard to get there, iterating, reducing the scope a little bit, refining the scope, improving the pacing, introducing new features faster, having better tutorials, right? We have a lot of small issues that have been pointed out by critics and fans alike. I don't think there was anything extremely major that would need to be completely overhauled. So it's just a matter of listening to everyone, going back into the lab. That sounds kind of cool, maybe. Yeah, and making the next game. Obviously, I also want to do other projects too within the Shujinkou IP for now. Mobile thing would be awesome, right? Also, a smaller thing to get people introduced into the series so that they don't have to play 200 hours of gameplay to like the characters and get to know the storyline, right? So I've been in talk with a couple studios in Japan for shorter anime, manga collaborations. I speak Japanese fluently, and I've practiced my business etiquette, so there's no issue in that regard. And I live here in Tokyo, so it's been quite easy to talk to people and kind of make progress in that sense too. Also, getting the game out on the Switch 2 would be amazing. However, Nintendo is quite strict about who they give dev kits to, so I might have to ring up Kyoto another time and give them a good little talk for an hour or two if they're willing to listen. So that's a quick summary of what's next.
Julian, I can't explain how impressed I am, simply because you did, and a lot of it's perseverance, and a lot of it is, it's like me. It's just somebody tells me I can't do something, and it pisses me off, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I can watch. And you've done a fantastic job, especially, I mean, Sony's right. You're very much a unicorn. First time studio, first time game. Congrats on launching, even, much less all the other success. So everybody go check it out. It's on Steam. I saw Tom drop the link earlier. It's coming out on Switch next week. So if you are more of a console player, there you go. Any final words
from me?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you for attending. For those who have attended, I don't do podcasts too often, but I think being able to talk about the game and my experiences with all of you guys is extremely important to not only me, but being able to share what I didn't do right so that those who are aspiring similarly can try to overcome the issues that they encounter on their own journey. Everyone has different timing, right? You don't have to be making your own company while you're still a college student. I actually don't recommend it unless you really, 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 really want to do it. But understand that everyone has their own pacing, but it is better to kind of think about what you want to do. And if there's nothing stopping you from trying to do it today or tomorrow, then you might as well do it. It applies to everything, right? Like going to the gym. If you can go today and it's somewhat nearby, just go, right? That kind of thing. So that's my last message regarding those who took the time to listen to this. Also, one last note about the game itself. There's been a lot of controversy on the net because Shujinkou is rated higher than every other game on OpenCritic if you go to OpenCritic's homepage. So Hades 2, Hollow Knight, Clair Obscur, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Death Stranding 2, Blueprints, we are scored higher, and it's because we have fewer reviews than every other place. Of course, you heard earlier that I did send like 80, 90 requests, but not everyone had the time to play our game. I understand that there's going to be some controversy and hate or doubt about Shujinkou because it's a new company and a new game, but I can promise you that the amount of heart, blood, sweat, tears, and energy that's been put into this game, I'm confident that it matches some of the best games that have come out this year. I'm 100% confident. 6.5 years, 7 time zones, 20 amazing people from so many different places pouring everything into this. I'm 100% confident that in many ways we can compete with some of the best games out there this year. Thank you for listening.
Dan?
Wow.
Seriously.
Wow. You are like one of the most inspiring people. You are like so passionate about this, but you're also so humble, which is just like, you are going to do, man, you're just going to do so well in your career. I have no doubt about that at all. But thank you so much, Julian, for coming on. It's been an amazing talk. This is quite a different podcast, don't you think, Jay?
Yes.
Yes. Wow. I just got to say, wow, that is awesome. Thank you for being so inspiring. Thank you for coming on here and telling us like the ups and downs of things. We really, really do appreciate it. If you're not on the Discord, join our Discord, discord.gg/IndieGameBusiness. You can also sign up for the Indie Game Business newsletter and get a list of publishers and investors. And hey, when's the next conference next year? What months are we doing?
December, I believe, actually.
Oh, we're actually going to do another one in December?
I think so. We've got a poll going. If we don't have a poll going now, Tom and Ash are putting one together to look at, potential topics because it'll be another deep dive. But yeah, I believe it's December.
Awesome. So thank you, everybody. And we don't have a podcast. Oh, no, we do have one next week. So tune in, and then we've got some booked up for the rest of the year, I guess. Isn't that right, Jay?
Apparently,
so you'll
yes.
be seeing those. Yeah, you'll be seeing them pop up over the next couple of weeks on your feed. Yeah, it gives you time to catch up on the last one. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you so much, everyone.
In stream. Click it. There we go.